Live and direct, live and I take no jive.
Legalize it.
So how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, "Great, Barry, a reefer."
Hi, and welcome back to the Koala podcast. And today we've got Courtney Moran from one of my favorite places in the world, Oregon, on the podcast. And she runs her own firm called Earth Law, and she's a hemp law specialist. She also does cannabis and psychedelics, but hemp is her sort of main focus. And she's worked on the Farm Bill, worked on a lot of Oregon legislation, and also a number of cases, a couple which really interest me about interstate trade of hemp, which we might try and get to later, because interstate trade, Oregon is way ahead of everybody else, always, as always, prepares the legislation and then waits for everybody else to catch up. But although it's debatable whether people are going to be catching up in the next 4 years on anything. Courtney, welcome to the show. First up, why don't you give us a little bit of background about your firm, Earth Law, and how you've got to where you are today?
Well, Sean, thank you so much for having me on. It's really a pleasure to get to share the information that we're going to talk about today. So I am the founding principal of Earth Law LLC. I founded my law firm in 2011 when I became a lawyer, and I have focused our practice on industrial hemp. We started doing medical marijuana criminal defense work, but I learned very quickly that was not my passion.
I think industrial hemp is the smart move, because it's what everybody else is ignoring, because it's not the quick buck.
Exactly. And for me, it's all about sustainability and working with our farmers and regenerating our soil and really providing healthy products. And that's the true heart of all of this for me.
No, well, I'm with you 100% on that, because I think there's not enough people who are putting enough energy into industrial hemp at all, not just in the US, but most of the planet at the moment. It seems a very obvious solution to a lot of problems. So best thing to do is ignore it, isn't it, in today's thinking?
Unfortunately, I think we're getting to the edge of the mountain, right? I mean, it's been a major hurdle, a lot of education that's been required. And along with that, a lot of infrastructure development, not only domestically, but internationally. And slowly but surely, we have new facilities coming online. So I remain hopeful that the industrial sectors will be able to get to that scale to start.
But we should reach the 17th century by the 22nd century.
Let's hope we get back there.
Anyway, look, rather than smart-ass comments from me, you said before the intro that the new Farm Bill has just been introduced in the Senate, and obviously this is the starting point for a whole lot of things. What's in the new Farm Bill with regard to industrial hemp? I mean, we can talk derivatives as well, compared to, was it the 2018 Farm Bill? I mean, what's the difference? What's the progress?
Huge progress, actually. So we had a House Farm Bill introduced in May. It has not yet, it got out of the House Agriculture Committee, but did not yet go to the House floor. Today, we had a Senate Farm Bill introduced, the Rural Prosperity and Food Security Act of 2024. And what is really positive about both bills is that they contain language and concepts from the Industrial Hemp Farming Act of 2023, which is a piece of legislation that I helped draft and lobby for. It's a companion bill that was in both the House and the Senate, and now that language has been put in the Farm Bill and in both farm bills. And what it does, it creates a new definition for industrial hemp, specifically providing for harvested material that is either the stalk or the grain or viable seeds to reproduce those stalk or grain varieties.
And in that legislation, do they introduce harsh percentage numbers on the obsession with THC in industrial hemp always surprises me everywhere on the planet. Was it 0.03 is but as soon as it gets to 1, people have 1% or something. People think that it's going to destroy young children's brains because they're going to be running through fields, doing whatever they think they're going to be doing with it. Is there sort of understanding in this new legislation that the obsession with the THC levels has really, to me anyway, from the outside, it seems to have held back a lot of the movement forward on getting industrial hemp up and running? I mean, what is their language, and what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, so that's actually a key piece of what the Industrial Hemp Act was attempting to accomplish, and those provisions have been included in both versions. And so if someone elects to grow industrial hemp, we provide in the language that a farmer can designate they're either growing industrial hemp or hemp for any purpose. And then if they select to only grow industrial hemp, they have different testing requirements. And it's really about reducing and relaxing the regulatory requirements, which is actually the exact language that's put in the Senate version, to visual inspections, to performance-based sampling methodologies, or even potentially certified seed or other procedures approved by the secretary. So the focus is more on what is that harvested material, not on the THC level, because if we're really growing grain and we're only harvesting that seed, or if we're really growing stalk and we're only harvesting that stalk and we're not using that flower or extracting that flower, we don't need to be concerned about what those THC levels are. And we know that some better performing fiber varieties are testing a little bit hotter, definitely hotter than the 0.3, but even, maybe a little bit above 1%. But if you're destroying that floral material, it shouldn't really matter.
Exactly. And then, and the other issue with that, I mean, just generally with your knowledge of the industry is, most government, as soon as the THC level is too high, it's all about destruction. Whereas couldn't you reuse that crop that you can't use for reason A because the THC is too high? I mean, is there, I presume there's nothing written in the legislation about this, but is there discussion about how to manage that? Because, don't they destroy an entire crop on one test, and therefore it just seems such a waste? And my main concern with a lot of this stuff is there's this waste is created through badly written legislation.
I don't disagree with you. So there are provisions from the 2018 FAR bill as implemented by USDA in the final rules that they do allow for remediation.
Mm-hmm.
And if a state or a tribe or even the USDA plan adopts authority around remediation, then there are potential options for the farmer to go through these remediation processes rather than destroying the whole crop. So it could be turning everything into biomass and combining it all together, or retaining the stalks or seeds or something like that. So it mirrors or provides a general concept around what we are talking about, that if you're going to allow the seeds and the stalk anyway through remediation, why not just focus on that if that's what these farmers are growing for anyway?
And then the other issue, of course, is the sort of the pushback against hemp derivative, Delta 9, Delta 8, Delta this, Delta that. How is that Mary, sorry, I forget her name, I always forget her surname, the amendment made.
Mary Miller.
That amendment sits within this Senate legislation?
It does not.
It does not. Okay.
It does not. So the Miller Amendment, also known as Amendment 35, which was included in the House Farm Bill, that had a lot of complicating factors, not only changing definition of hemp to the 0.3 total THC, but then had all those specific exclusions from the definition, and created a new definition for hemp-derived cannabinoid products. But in this Senate version, the only difference is that there is a change of the definition of hemp, but to total THC, including THCA. Okay. And then updates the testing procedures and the violations based on total THC rather than a Delta 9 level.
So does that suggest if it passes, the federal government would rather the states made their decisions on what happened with hemp derivatives?
They leave that up to the states in this Senate version. So there is a specific clause that is included, and they specifically state like the impact or effect on state or tribal law. And it does say that it does not preempt authority specifically in regards to regulating hemp or hemp products relating to the production, manufacture, or sale of hemp or hemp products. So the state by state patchwork that we're seeing of all these different regulations on certain products would be allowed to be continued under this Senate language.
So it's sort of a suggestion that I hear a lot of muttering around at the moment that, generally across the board, this new GOP administration is going to regard cannabis and hemp as more of a states' right issue and not, so we're going to have the rescheduling to 3, that'll probably happen, but not much else is going to happen. It's sort of in the wider picture, but you see maybe more happening if this piece of legislation passes the Senate, more happening with hemp federally is I'm trying to understand the balance. Look, as we discussed, it's really difficult to tell what's going to be happening over the next 18 months. What's your thinking about how they're going to think about it? Maybe by not including White House thinking, administration thinking, but more how they're thinking in the House and the Senate. Where do they want it to go? Are they that interested in it? Or is it a bit of a sideline conversation in terms of all the other things that are about to happen?
I definitely think they are interested. The counsel for both the Senate and the House Agriculture Committees have informed me that the issue on cannabinoid regulation has taken more time than any other issue in the Farm Bill.
Okay.
And what we're seeing across the country with all the different changing regulations, whether it's done through the legislature, whether it's done through emergency or executive orders by governors, all of the litigation that's going on, I think echoes how important of a situation this is and the need for clarity. What that clarity will be, I don't think we know. I do think that if we look at the language that's been introduced both from the Senate and the House, 2 things are consistent. One is that there is a move to total THC within the definition of hemp. And so and specifically to include THCA. So this mass, THCA sales that are happening all over the country, I would say that is going to be brought into check. And also because both bills do provide a new definition for industrial hemp and different testing authority for farmers that are solely growing industrial hemp, and easier regulations, no background checks, things like that, that I do think we will see more support on the industrial side. What happens with the derivatives and the other THC isomers, I don't think is clear yet. Neither of the bills define total THC other than saying it includes THCA. And so what the Secretary of Agriculture does, and whoever that Secretary of Agriculture,
because that's going to be my next question is, who it sounds as they've worked through the arguments with regard to hemp. And so that language within the bill sits fairly firmly. But of course, the Farm Bill is is a huge thing. And one of the big discussions, of course, is Kennedy Jr. and all the changes he wants to make. And I presume all the changes he wants to make, that means massive changes to other parts of the Farm Bill. So are we going to be seeing this Farm Bill as something that's actually eventually got round to working for hemp, but then won't work for hemp because suddenly it opens up a whole nother can of worms on all the other issues that want to be raised, and it's going to be amendment city for the next 18 months. And therefore nothing progresses for hemp because of everything else, so to speak.
That very well could happen. So right now we're sitting in a lame duck session. So there's less than 20 days left. So Could something miraculous happen and a bill get passed? Of course, it's Congress. Anything can happen. I think the likelihood of a full farm bill getting passed, probably very unlikely. You know, the GOP leadership, I would imagine, wants to be able to have control of both the House and the Senate before this 5-year package gets put forward. But there's also the appropriations bill, and that also needs to get passed or get extended out. And so one thing that is interesting regarding the appropriations bill is on the House side, the Mary Miller Amendment was included in the House appropriations bill. So that is, again, problematic for that sector of the hemp industry. And so whether we get a farm bill, whether we get an appropriations bill, yet to be seen, probably unlikely, more so that we get a continuing resolution, a stopgap bill that would extend out not only the authority for the farm bill again, because it was expired on September 30th of 2023, expired September 30th of 2024. We don't have that authority yet, and several of the funding pieces in the farm bill will expire on December 31st, but then further, the appropriations continuing resolution is also set to expire. And so they're going to have to provide some sort of continuing resolution authority to extend out both if we are going to bring this into the 119th Congress.
I mean, to me, it seemed like everything else. Last week of February, we're going to start discovering what the new world is. Yeah.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Okay. So we could, I mean, look, we could talk about the farm bill until the cows come home, pun not intended. Let's talk about some of the sort of state issues with regard to hemp. And as I said, again, before we turn the record button on, very interested in the work you've done on interstate movement or trade of hemp and hemp related seeds. Do you want to give us a little bit of background on that and where that is, and are we going anywhere with it?
Yeah, excellent. So the case that you're talking about is KAB versus USPIS. And that's a case that I litigated against the Postal Service back in 2018. And what we did in that case was we established the precedent for the shipment of hemp. And that case, the first one was specifically about CBD, but then the second case was about viable seeds. And it set the precedent for the shipment through the Postal Service. And that opinion was actually published before the 2018 Farm Bill was signed into law. So it protected all the hemp and hemp products that were being produced and transported under 2014 Farm Bill authority, which was really important because the way that 2018 Farm Bill was implemented, not all states adopted the 2018 Farm Bill until actually 2022. And so that authority and shipment was protected, but then it also led to the Postal Service updating what's called Publication 52 and their overarching authority on the shipment of hemp. So that authority is in place. The shipment of hemp is protected through the Postal Service. But what is different is what's happening with these other carriers, because some carriers are or are not allowing it. I recently saw that UPS is issuing fines to folks that are shipping non-compliant material.
So it's
and
the same
different
as,
things are happening.
sort of the same as
carrier.
banking and finance, isn't it? I can't mention the word cannabis, even though I don't go anywhere near it. I just have a directory which killed one PayPal account just because I used the word cannabis top 200 lawyers directory. So I mean, it's the same fear in that sort of part of corporate US that they're going to end up in court over these things?
Could be. It's more that we're seeing seizures happen locally. So in the 2018 Farm Bill, we did specifically protect the shipment and transportation of hemp and hemp products through a state or a tribe. So if it's going from state A to state C, but passes through state B, B can't stop it. But what we are seeing is that material that is non-compliant is getting seized, either right when it's getting shipped or before it gets delivered, or sometimes along the way. And then, of course, there's litigation about what's happening along the way. But if it's violating that particular state's laws, that's where we're seeing seizures happen.
And what about international trade of things like seeds?
I haven't worked on any seed cases, but I have worked on, and I have one pending right now regarding compliant hemp flower, and those getting seized by customs.
And that's quite a regular occurrence that they get seized by customs. If people are trying to slowly develop an international hemp trade that, seeds make oil, you need fiber to make industrial products. How hard or easy is it for people to build those businesses and work with people outside their jurisdiction internationally? Or does all this stuff happen within? So in Australia, it happens in Australia. In the UK, it happens in the UK. In the US, it happens in the US. In Canada, or can they communicate and trade the actual product?
They can communicate and they can trade. And I know that there's a lot of actual grant money from USDA going to different nonprofits to help develop market access internationally. And so a lot of companies are hoping to expand and are currently expanded beyond the US border to international marketplaces. But there have been issues with customs, specifically around floral material that tests even above that 0.3 total, even if it's 0.6, for example. They're claiming that it's marijuana, when I think we all know that it's not, and it truly is actually hemp. And so what I've understood from customs so far is that most of the time they're just seizing this material. Nobody's really fighting it or appealing it, and they're just letting the seizure go. And then, companies are going on taking the financial loss.
As with cannabis, are there UN rules on the movement of hemp and hemp products for industrial use?
That is an excellent question. I don't have a specific answer to. A lot of what I'm seeing are there, import export rules per country. There's import export codes, and that's what's being followed, that brokers are making sure that each business has the appropriate licenses that they're following, if there's phytosanitary requirements and things like that. But that's what I've seen for the shipments that I've consulted on.
Seeing more media discussion eventually and more in research money, as all these things that you mentioned earlier in the conversation, do you feel as though hemp is actually getting to that point, and maybe 2025, bar politics, is really the point that cannabis doesn't take a back, but doesn't go to the back pages and hemp comes to the front pages? Because I can't see that happening, but there is actually a general level of understanding how much is possible in building this side of the cannabis sector.
From what I'm hearing internationally, that is very well understood. I think in the US, because of the issues we've had with the hemp programs, with the intoxicating products hitting the market, it has created a lot of confusion around the overall concept of hemp and the benefits of industrial hemp. I believe that the support that we have seen with Industrial Hemp Act and the inclusion of that language in both the House and now the Senate farm bills shows that Congress understands that there is a difference, and we need to create this delineation not only through definition but through program requirements to help build the industrial sectors, because it's not only impacting the general regulatory conversation, but it's impacting farmers' interests. And we hear from different manufacturers around the country that they are struggling to get farmers to want to grow the industrial varieties because they've heard what's happened with CBD and how many farmers lost out, and they don't trust it. And so we need to separate that conversation. And we also need to help these fiber manufacturers and these more industrial manufacturers grow in scale and so that they are ready for the farmers. And so it's just been this very slow process of that infrastructure development.
Right,
And
because that was my next question is, state by state infrastructure, specifically processing plants. How, in your knowledge, where's the money coming from to create those plants? And should there be more money from government? And again, the issue is it seems that the onus is going to fall on state government because federal government now seems to want to chop any spending on a whole range of things. Every time there's an opportunity to do something, federal government, and it seems that you eventually got round to writing legislation, eventually got people talking about it sensibly, something comes along that cuts the opportunity to have investment in the industry.
what I will say is that a lot of the companies, especially on the grain and fiber sectors, have used their own personal funding, have done, private equity.
You reckon that's where the money's going to come from? Private equity. Do you have to? Sorry.
Well, no, it has, but in the last year and a half, we have seen several USDA grants go to not only the nonprofits that are working to expand market access and to work with farms, but several companies actually getting grants for their manufacturing and specifically fiber manufacturers. And so there is some federal funding finally going to these sectors. Whether it's enough is a separate conversation. But what I have to hope with the new administration that they will see the benefit of supporting the development and growth of domestic infrastructure. And so if we really want the US to be less reliant on imports, we have to build up our domestic infrastructure. So I have to hope that some of this federal funding and some of the new grants that will become available will provide for that.
So it's sort of like a blue collar industrial investment in terms of getting the money to build good old fashioned solid things that then either process things or make things. Yes.
Yes.
And sorry, I mean, because I don't know the answers to these questions, so I'm sort of interested to ask if you you do a hemp processing for fiber and other uses. Do you have to have only pieces of capital equipment that are created specifically for that, or can you use existing equipment that's already in play?
Some are using modified existing equipment. A lot of them have the larger manufacturers. I mean, they have very specific equipment that they have worked with engineers that may have developed this technology in other countries that they are bringing it here. They are bringing in the experts for people that have and businesses that have done this for a lot longer than we have here. So I think there's a combination of both. I mean, we're seeing more on the farming equipment that there's some new technologies coming out, some that have been modifications of existing equipment, some European equipment coming over here. And so there is a mix of both, but I think a lot of it is coming from the more experienced places that actually already have this infrastructure in place.
I mean, before we go, just a couple of quick questions. You just mentioned there other places that are more experienced than the US. Which other markets would you say are leading in industrial hemp in terms of overseas jurisdictions at the moment?
Different places in the European Union. I mean, they have a leg up on us. China, they have a leg up on us, especially on the industrial sectors. And so I think it's just looking to the places that have historic cultivation, have historic production, and did not limit their industry the way that we have here in the US.
And then at this point this year, do you feel more confident than you did at this point last year about industrial hemp? I'll leave the long silence in.
I'm torn because I see a lot of opportunity, and I think there's a lot of businesses that are doing a lot of incredible things. I also know there's a lot of businesses that have really struggled. And so there's folks that are having to shut down their facilities while other folks are just getting them online. And I do think it is going to take separating the conversation, getting more reasonable regulations in place, providing that support through grants, and through education.
Courtney Moran, Earth Law, thank you very much for educating me and hopefully everybody else listening about the state of industrial hemp in the US. And I'd love to talk to you every month about this, to be honest, because it's my, for me, I think it's the most important subject around, cannabis, psychedelics, etc. I do think industrial hemp should really be leading the conversation across the board.
I agree with you. I think the bigger picture for our communities, for our environment, for our planet is industrial hemp. I think that
the conversation has always been about human consumption or human use rather than the wider use of these compounds or plants or whatever we want to call them, for, as you say, the greater benefit of not just human beings, but the entire planet. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that we need to make sure that when we are growing industrial hemp, that we are using organic and regenerative agriculture practices, because otherwise we're not going to realize that full benefit. So I think when we can bring all these different pieces of the puzzle together, then we're really going to see the picture that so many of us started our journeys to accomplish.
Fantastic.
You are welcome. Can I just also give folks the heads up? So we actually put out a docu-series through our YouTube channel, but it's called Legalize It, Triumphs in Hemp Lobbying. And it goes through my journey of the last 8 years and the 12 bills that I helped pass on industrial hemp and hemp throughout the United States. And I think that gives a broader picture, not only about myself, but also about the journey and the education that it's taken to get to the point where we are today and how far we still need to go.
Well, I'll include all that information on the information page that goes with the podcast as well, so people can be looking at that whilst listening to you speak.
Thank you so much, Sean.
Live and direct, live and a date no jive.
Legalize it. So how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, "Great, Barry, a reefer."